Tell us about your group, how it came to be, and what you're doing right now.
First, let me talk about Africa. It's such a big continent that it could fit China and South America and also Africa. All of people can fit onto the continent of Africa. And regardless, Africa doesn't have the kind of media that gives Africa enough coverage. The outside media that covers Africa for what they can get from Africa, mostly African resources. And so if you read an African story in the New York Times, it's preparing Africans or the story of Africa for people who live in New York City. If you read an African story in the BBC, it is a story about Africa for people who live in the UK. So what we're trying to do here is to have Africans tell their own stories without fear, without shame, about the conditions of Africans on the continent of Africa and for Africa. So the continents, the nuances that you see in our stories, in our reports, in our videos, are things that Africans feel about Africa and not what non-Africans feel about Africa. And that is how this is about. And most importantly, it is a coverage that has to do with how Africans treat Africans, because we've heard so much about how non-Africans treated Africa and Africans. How the colonialists came, the slave masters came, the corporations came, and what they did to Africa, what they did to African environment, what they did to African resources, what they did to African economies, what they did to African culture, what they did to African music, how they stole African artifacts. So, but this time around, Africans want to talk about how Africans are treating Africa, how Africans are in some ways bastardizing African culture, economy, how they're conniving and conspiring with non-Africans to destroy the continent of Africa.